Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Happy Friday. Thanks for being here. Lots to talk about this Friday, especially when it comes to the First Alert Safety Desk this week. We had a lot of great reports, a lot of important information to get to throughout the week, and definitely some big ones that came down, like this one. First and foremost, that report that came down earlier this week with 1 in 10 Wisconsin teens attempting suicide in 2023. That was a big one. But also, it seems like a lot of you really liked the IQ story with the connection between a baby's birth and a child's IQ. We'll talk about that. And then cases almost doubling as CDC expands their warning of salmonella infections linked to recalled charcuterie meats. That was something that I covered this morning. So we'll be chatting about all of that. And if you are watching on Facebook, just go ahead and let me know where you're watching from. Say good morning if you'd like. And we'll kick some things off here. And let me know if you can hear me all right too. All right. Get some of the information there at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so the first story I want to talk about is this one, this report that came down. Again, it was earlier in the week, and the full report is at WBAY.com, but it's such an important one, especially when we're talking about kids in Wisconsin, our kids here in Wisconsin. So this report is a state one. It's an annual report by the state's Office of Children's Mental Health. And this was a big one that came down this week. It shows how the mental health crisis still has a ways to go here in Wisconsin and around the country. Obviously, it's a big conversation throughout the country, and it has been lately. So the report is pretty user-friendly, something that I was talking about this week. It's pretty straightforward, and if you go to WBAY.com, and I'm actually going to move things around here, make sure you can get to it and show you where to get to it. Move this out of the way. We're going to go to the website, actually. Here's the story. So all I did is I clicked here. Our web team does an awesome job of making sure that that's there for us. So you click that, and eventually it'll load. A little slow, sleepy on this Friday. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're doing a recap of First Alert Safety Desk stories this week. Thank you, Jody. I appreciate you letting me know that you can hear me. Okay, let's try that again. So, but just to recap a little bit more of the report itself, we'll wait for that to load. We're talking about a 20-page report here, and that's why I wanted to recap a little bit of this with you guys. It's having trouble loading, but that's okay. So hopefully yours works. But it, again, shows the mental health crisis and where we're at here in Wisconsin. So it does this red light, green light sort of approach in the report that makes it really user-friendly. And red light means stop. We're headed in the wrong direction. There was an example that I showed, and it was talking about data compared to 2022, report of more girls, children of color, and LGBTQ kids that are struggling with anxiety, depression, thoughts of suicide. That was something that was given a red light. Something that was also given a red light was the number of kids who feel they just don't belong in their schools, which impacts attendance. You know, it impacts their academic success and mental health, all of those things. So the original report, which is linked right here, and it should work. Maybe I can find it a different way, just because the computer is maybe just acting up here. Because I really want to show you guys what it looks like. It's kind of the whole point of being here with you today. We've got ways to figure it out. Maybe. It's such a big report too. It kind of takes a while for it to come up. So if you want to take a look at that, please do. But just to look at some of the highlights here, once again, there were improvements. So not only did we have the red lights in that report, there were green lights too, which was a glimmer of hope. So there were improvements in how many kids are living in poverty. That was great to hear. Also, the teen birth rate is down to 1 in 100 teenage girls, now below the national average. There were some other really good things, like bullying went down. I know that schools and districts around the state or across the country have really pushed to nip that in the bud. You know, it's been how many years now of struggling with that, and it looks like the numbers are going down. Hopefully some of these schools that are hoping to bring it down, they're successful in what they're doing with some of the programs that they have in place, like Speak Up, Speak Out in Wisconsin. I was talking about that this week. Speak Up, Speak Out Wisconsin is the one we have here. It's an anonymous reporting system, and so that's really helpful to have that in our area, because people can anonymously report things like a gun, suicide, bullying, things like that. So I know that that's been pretty successful in our area. So take a look at that if you want. I don't think that it updated, so we'll just move on. Let's go to a different story. This one was just so big online, which made me chuckle because it was one of those stories that I wasn't sure if you guys would find interesting, but I did. So I reported about this story talking about a baby's birth, sort of when they're born. So it's when they're born versus their IQ later in life, later in their childhood, actually. So it's possible to predict your child's IQ when they're born, according to this new study. It was in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Again, that connection between how early a baby is born, their weight, and that all impacting his or her mental development later in life. Kind of cool. Babies who are born, it says, too early, or those who are born very small, are at a greater risk of a number of health and developmental problems, as you might know. So doctors say early intervention for any developmental delay is key to a child's success, is something else that I talked about in my report this week. If you're just tuning in, we're just recapping some of the stories from the First Alert Safety Desk that I cover on Action 2 News this morning. So some of the bigger ones that came down this week. Another one, and by the way, I'm just going to cut to this here. Got to move this out of the way. Hello, good morning. So we want to go over to the website just to show you where these stories are. So if you go to the main page at WBAY.com, go right here to Safety Desk, click that. That's where all of my stories are posted. So this morning I did the story about multivitamin supplements slowing cognitive decline according to this new clinical study. That was interesting if you want to read that. We have all the links that I always mention on air. And one more story that I wanted to talk about today was the salmonella outbreak. And it's not quite posted just yet. We're working on it. But I'm going to pull it up. Oh, hey, there's the report that I wanted to show you guys. So we'll go back to that in just a moment. But here's that report that I mentioned talking about teen mental health. Do you see how colorful it is? It's so user-friendly. You should read this. It's really important, especially if you either work with kids, you have kids at home. It shows what the state is doing to improve some of these, and there's that red light, green light. It's an indicator dashboard, which I found really interesting. So right away you see this one talking about healthy behaviors, technology, and then you go to social economic factors with those red light, green lights. Right here, high school students feeling sad or hopeless, that one went up. So they did a red light on that one. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you guys. But I also want to go back to talking about that salmonella outbreak. So I went ahead a little bit here, a little ahead of myself, but I wanted to show you this because I've been talking about it all morning, and you might recall a couple of weeks ago is when this came out. We were hearing about the recalls with this charcuterie meat, but it has now doubled those cases. So that's why this is so important. Not to mention the fact that if you click here, states, this is on the CDC website, by the way, if you go to the salmonella outbreak or just outbreaks, you see Wisconsin right there on the list, 2 people, number of people sick. So we have been impacted here in our state. That's why I really wanted to get that out there. But if you go back, it shows which ones, the products that may be contaminated. So it's prosciutto, different meats that were sold at Sam's Club and Costco. And those are the Beretta brand right here. Do you see that? So if you go down, it just talks about what you should do, what businesses should do. And here's the original. Look at that, I believe, where it explains. I want to look at the labels. Here's some of the, a little bit bigger for you to be able to see that. So if you have any of these, make sure you just throw them away. They were at Sam's Club, Costco. They were under a couple of different names. Do you see that right here? So if these look familiar, the Bussetto brand. And it talks about the best if used by date, April 27th. So check the lot number and all of that. So we'll have the link on WBAY.com, but that's where you find that. And I just wanted to give everybody a heads up, especially if you're maybe going to do a charcuterie board this weekend for the Packers, doing a party. That would be really good and helpful to know so you don't get anybody sick at home, because some of those symptoms, vomiting, diarrhea, things like that, and it can be deadly in a very severe cases, so we wanted to let everybody know about that. So those are the top 3 stories that I covered, but once again, if you go to the website, not to go back and forth here, but you could look at some of those stories that I covered this morning. Once again, just thank you for tuning in and recapping some of these stories with me. Jody, good morning. Thank you very much for chiming in and tuning in. Every morning, Monday through Friday, on Action 2 News this morning, I cover these stories, and there's always something going on, something to keep you and your family safe. So by Friday, we've talked about so much that I like to cover some of the bigger stories, but there's so many. I do 2 a day, and sometimes that doesn't even feel like enough because there are so many stories that come down. This one, for example, more adults are being diagnosed with cancer at a younger age. This was a story actually expanding on one that I did back in September. Here's the anonymous reporting system story I mentioned. This one's about fruit juice, 100% fruit juice linked to weight gain in kids. You should read that one. That one's pretty interesting. And then when we had that cold weather earlier in the week, I mean, it's still cold, but I was talking about protecting yourself from frostbite, hypothermia, very important. But the time and temperature, yeah, 9 degrees. So it's very chilly outside. So if you want to read some of those tips from the CDC, you could go on there. But if you want to hear them right off the bat, you should tune into Action 2 News this morning, Monday through Friday, and catch some of those stories that I get, because sometimes I do get them overnight, so you could get them right off the bat in the morning. Other than that, I think I'll just close it out here. Make sure you tune in for Action 2 News mid-morning, coming up at 9 a.m. Catherine will talk about the news. We'll have some of the safety desk stuff that I talked about this morning. And then also Steve will talk about the forecast as we go into the weekend. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Go Pack Go. Happy Friday. Have a good weekend.